Yeah, I've got a bunch of episodes for my podcast like stored on my phone in different places, and it's like maybe I need to move those off. It's eating up my storage.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we are recording now. I am here with Troy. Is it Witham, correct? Last name?
Mm-hmm.
Witham. Troy Witham. And Troy and I were college students together way back at CSUB. And he is a technology expert. And as we are all learning to continue about learning about technology in these times especially, he's going to give us some ideas about what technology looks like in education, what works, what you need to be careful about. And you are a Google certified educator, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so just for a little bit of my end introduction, my name is Beau Larimer, and this is primarily for my English class, English 3010, which is future teachers learning about teaching English. And I teach at Independence High School, I teach at CSUB, teach this class, and after our jump to remote learning, I started a little podcast interviewing different educators with different areas of expertise. Troy, you mind telling us a little bit about your educational journey and what currently you are up to these days?
Yeah, no problem. As Beau already said, I am Troy Witham. Born and raised here in Bakersfield, went to CSUB for my bachelor's degree, which was in English, wanted to be a teacher. Got my teaching credential from Point Loma here in Bakersfield as well, master's and everything there also. I currently am in my, finishing up year 7, teaching junior high. This last year, I made the shift from classroom teacher to academic coach. So now I'm working more, providing that coaching training for teachers just so, give them what they need to improve their practice and hopefully impart some technological wisdom along the way. And along with that, this last year I started Beyond the Class, which is where you can get podcasts. And right now I've got a friend that's helping me with that, and we're putting together some more episodes, so that will hopefully be expanded soon. But talking about just teaching tech, whatever we feel like.
Awesome. Hey, Troy, do you want to both go to audio now? Is that okay? Because I was thinking we might struggle with the video things. We might just switch to audio, which is that's the original podcast format anyway. So I think
Sounds
that might
good.
help. Sounds good. All right. So we're going to turn off our video simply because it's going to help the process of listening to the recording. So can you still hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, perfect. I think that'll help the process. So to get into it, and shout out to Point Loma. Next week's guest is Dr. Jill Hamilton Bunch.
Woo! Yes.
She is a pro. So one of the most common things that is discussed, whether it's on the plan or not on the plan, in our professional learning meetings as teachers with other teachers at our school called PLCs. One of the most common things, teacher meetings, the most common topic is talking about how to deal with students being distracted by cell phones. And everyone's got a different approach to it. I know that I heard from a little birdie here or there that even our district, there's been whispers of using a tech or an anti-tech tech called Yonder, which is basically having students lock their phones away in a more systematic version. But everyone's got a different take on it. What is your kind of approach to helping tackle that issue of students being distracted with cell phones?
Well, I mean, and I feel with this, no matter what, it's always good to make sure, first and foremost, you are, following and supporting the policy that exists at your site and or within your district. You don't need to be button heads with that, but if you can work your way onto the team that helps make those kind of decisions, always a great place to be. For me personally, and this may come off a little aggressive for some. I feel that if you're having a problem in the classroom with students being distracted by phones, that is more of a classroom management issue than it is anything else. And teachers need to really look at the way that they engage with expectations and discipline in the classroom, because in the 6+ years I spent in the classroom with students, I can only think of 2 occasions where I ever had a problem of students getting distracted by phones, including times when I asked the kids specifically, take your phones out, I want you to do X, Y, Z. So it always has to start with management. Personally, you know what, the phones, I get why it can be distracting with, music and games and texting. And there are certain aspects of that we justifiably want to protect the students from, whether that be, online bullying or just going places that they really shouldn't be going online. However, if we really want to engage the students in a format and in a realm that they relate to, the digital realm is one of those, and the cell phone is one of those little portals to it that most students engage with on a regular basis. So you know what? It's a tool they are comfortable using. Go for it. Design some parameters, keep them occupied and focused, be the facilitator, and let them explore. By telling them no, you can't, that's only going to make them want to engage more with it. Me, that's what I think personally.
Oh, very interesting. Yes, I have a little bit more kind of assertive where I'm saying no, you can't at certain times. But it definitely, I think you have to link it to, having engaging teaching, right? And being systematic in your management is important, right? If you let this phone, it's easy to let the phone thing become personal, unprofessional, emotional battles with different kids, which creates a really toxic classroom environment if it feels like it's you versus them and it's the war of phones. And you want to avoid that kind of thing altogether. So absolutely, I think a big part of it is being systematic and being professional in your classroom management, having engaging teaching. But certainly cell phones are a part of everyday life. So because they're such a part of life when the kid walks out of the classroom, between periods, the next class, when he goes home, the cell phone is just with them all the time. I think it's helpful to, at some point in the year, if possible, help, or in your policy, teach the kids, hey, here's how you want to regulate your technology and how cell phones can be a distracting thing on studies or homework. So really helping them think about, okay, I'm going to set aside tech and focus on this, or I'm going to bring tech in and use it as a tool intentionally is a good thing. And I love your idea of, you mentioned a second ago about having them use cell phones in some of the learning activities they're doing. Could you talk about any of the ways that you have them use their cell phone as a tool to access their learning?
Well, one way, and it was something we kind of you briefly mentioned, but before we started recording, one thing that I had them do as my district first kind of started diving into one-to-one technology, using Chromebooks and whatnot with the students. At that time, the webcams we had weren't the greatest quality. A lot of us weren't really familiar with having students use a webcam to record things on things like Flipgrid. And I remember, guys, you know what? If you don't want to use the webcam on your Chromebook to do the Flipgrid video, I'm totally cool with that. Go ahead and take out your cell phone. Here's the code, plug it in, and post your Flipgrid video. Get as you want with it. I really don't care. Just don't go outside. I don't want you being too loud, and I don't need you posting anything inappropriate. You know what's going to happen if you do. And the second I gave them not just permission to use it, but I gave them a constructive environment in which to use it, all of a sudden it was not just free time on a phone. It was, oh, well, you know what? I know how to do this. Oh, wait, this is kind of like now Snapchat with filters, and I can add stickers to it. And, ooh, let me comment on this person's. Immediately, the students, because of that familiarity with the tool, they immediately engaged in a way that I hadn't expected them to. I thought it was going to be a simple post the video and then they'd be done. They engaged with it well past that, even to the point of asking, oh, can we do that again? So I think it's about, it comes back to this idea I heard years ago before we began the journey. And it was remembering that technology is not your pedagogy. Technology is a tool. Like any tool, you need to think about, what is the tool supposed to be used for? How do I use the tool? Let me teach someone how to use the tool, and then let them go. If you don't teach the kids how to use the tool, if you don't give them that experience, it's a wasted effort on your part. So yeah, it's to something like that, starting simple. It's so great.
That's awesome. And I think that is the silver lining of some of this remote teaching that everyone's has dived into in some way or another, is really learning how to use some of these tools in, necessity demands it, and it's not the ideal conditions for sure, with all the stress of what's going on, but really having educators have a chance to dig in and understand some of these tools, and then look forward to returning to the classroom and using those tools moving forward in instruction, which we're going to talk a little bit later in with blended learning. But I really like what you said about technology is not pedagogy. And I think if there's one kind of mantra that you can take away from our conversation, I would say that's a great one, where I think a lot of people overvalue the tool for the instead of the teaching. And it's really, how well is that tool used? I know we're going to get into it in a second with project-based learning, but I know while tech is more and more one-to-one, there are certainly lots of schools, and my school is one of them, where even though the technology is one-to-one, students don't check out a Chromebook. So on campus, not every class they walk into has a teacher who has a cart in their room. So even though the total number of carts matches students, not every teacher has a cart. And so if you are at a place where you can have them utilize that technology as a learning tool, that's great. I think it comes back to, having clean classroom management, clear classroom management, and saying, hey, we're going to use it as a tool, or we're at a point where we're engaged and focusing on something else. So we're going to try and separate ourselves from the distraction, but in a way that helps them practice focusing and practicing regulating how they use their personal tech, not in a way that creates all these interpersonal conflicts. So I think that's really important. Moving on to this. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, and one thing too, kind of with that, at my site, we are fortunate enough that, we've had administrators over the years since we began one-to-one that made it a priority to ensure that in all of the, no, I don't want to say traditional classrooms, but, the core content classrooms, and then a lot of our courses of interest, so it's leaving out things like PE, obviously, and then, music classes, instrumental music especially. We made sure in all the classrooms we had a cart with laptops. So every classroom had one-to-one computers, so students could engage with that tool. What I'm hoping as we move out of this distance learning period, maybe next year, or hopefully, if not this year, the following, hopefully we don't just see the, kind of the proliferation of that idea of, the students come on campus, they check out their laptop in the morning, they return it at the end of the day. I would really love to see us move to the model of, for years we checked out textbooks and the kids had to take them home. Check out a laptop to them at the beginning of the year, give them the charging cable, let the kids take them, and be able to work on that device when they're not with us. Sure, some kids may not have internet access, but with Google, everything can be done offline, and when they come back to school in the morning, it will all sync up again. There's really no reason now, especially in terms when we think of equity, there's really no reason to not go that direction. We're doing it right now, and we already can see it's not the nightmare we thought it would be. So I'm hoping that's what that's the one shift we see after this.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And yeah, especially when you mention equity, giving everyone an opportunity to use that tool is so important. Moving into kind of another point with the discussion is having the tool is important, and kind of the first level of digital literacy, in my mind, is access, right? You really can't have access unless at the administrative level, educators are talking about giving access like we were just talking about. But then kind of moving into helping students think more carefully and be aware of how consume digital media, how they use it to connect, and some of that's connecting to a learning community. Sometimes that's connecting to a personal community. And then also becoming creators with that technology. Could you speak a little bit about how you think that's important, and ways that in an English language arts classroom you can either teach it directly or integrate it into some of the instruction?
Absolutely. So I think first the bigger I guess thing aspect of that needs to be addressed first, and it's something that it has to be site-wide. It can't just be with certain teachers or just with ELA. It needs to be a staff-wide effort. But it really behooves teachers now to actually be strategically thinking about how we teach 21st century skills, but also how to be a wise consumer of anything you get from a digital realm. How to be a wise consumer rather than just poking around. If we can teach those 21st century skills, teaching kids not just how to navigate, because truth be told, most kids already know how to navigate the web, probably better than some adults do. Teaching them how to navigate it, but also how to look past what they see and truly be able to evaluate the knowledge that they're getting. We live in a time, where social media, especially, you can read just about anything on there, and not be able to tell just by looking at it if this is the truth or if this is some kind of, you have to be able to go and do your own research. Teaching students how to do that research, teaching them how to be wise about what they see and what they transmit should be that first thing that we teach them. The ELA class is, in my opinion, one of the best places to start that, because as ELA teachers, one of the main things that I loved about teaching English language arts was the fact that I get to teach students how to create an argument, how to sift through information and data to find their facts that support the ideas. Teaching students how to do that digitally, how to look at an article and see, well, you know what, this isn't really a good argument because the evidence is not present, or this is all evidence based on an opinion. That is, key instruction that if it doesn't occur in the ELA classroom, the other content areas aren't going to be able to support those learnings. What was on board digitally. I think starting there is that's that first kind of cornerstone that we need to address. But once you've done that, in ELA, you immediately have this, very diverse and amazing realm of what you can do with students, and beyond that, what they can, create for themselves. And one tool that I'm hoping I can push more teachers to, especially those who work at a school that uses G Suite products, I really want to push a lot of people towards using Google Sites more often, because that is a introductory place for a lot of students to explore building their own websites, cultivating their own archives of information, creating portfolios of their work. That's something that can follow them, not just, while they're in junior high for me, but that can follow them to high school. That can follow them to college if they really wanted it to.
So I really appreciate that. We're going to get into project-based learning in a second, and I think that would be a fascinating project for a student to use to demonstrate their learning and practice those internet research skills, and think about creating how their digital footprint is shaped, right? Because they all have one. And
Exactly.
I totally agree that um, I totally agree that using internet research as kind of an access point to teaching how to be careful and how you consume is such a great tool. So I think that is something that all teachers entering the English language arts classroom should think about. You don't just say, hey, we're going to grab what information you need and we're going to jump forward into the writing really quickly or jump forward into the drafting, but really taking time to teach what is an open source, right? Why would we not use
Right.
Wikipedia in a paper? What is intellectual property, right? What are credible sources?
Hmm.
What are less credible or less academic blogs? And having that discussion, having students have that discussion is so important. And I think
Oh
that's a great
yeah.
way to kind of. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, oh no, I was just agreeing with you. And I mean, and you can even go beyond that. I did it several times, especially with my Avid students. If you want to explore social media with them, which I feel like teachers should, Twitter is a great place for that because, with Twitter, especially for educators, there is such a wealth of knowledge as you cultivate your PLN on there, your professional learning network through Twitter. And there are things that come to my feed every single day that, these are educators, these are people in technology, these are people that a lot of times are, at the forefront of what's going on, but still having that mindset of, okay, wait, I need to read this. I need to dive into it. I need to analyze it, see, okay, does this work? Is this valid? Now, is it something I can actually use? Being able
Absolutely.
to explore that with students from your own social media is not just a great lesson, but it's a great relationship builder with students. So,
Absolutely. And helping students think about, just like you would want them to have resume building skills, I think exactly that. You want them to think about, okay, what is my more private circle and presence online? And then what is kind of the more public footprint that I may use later on for branding or use to publicize or to use to network, sometimes for career or education goals. Absolutely
absolutely.
helping them think about it as more than just kind of this place to go for entertainment, but hey, this is where you're going to go for grown-up stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So project-based learning. That was the other thing I was going to add is building a site was awesome because it helps them think about, hey, here's kind of this public presence that I could use to network or use to build something that I'm interested in. Also, I found that teaching them internet research and how to evaluate the web is very important. But giving them the opportunity to use their cell phone as tools helps with the equity thing, because later on, when they maybe don't have a Chromebook in front of them, they can view that as not just personal tech, that they could view that cell phone as, hey, this is something I can use to record video or use to network or use in these different ways that they might not have thought of before. One project that I'll mention as an example that was really fun, and especially getting into project-based learning, is helping students think about using these tools as not just tools to document learning, but tools to create learning and connect to the learning process. So when, for example, teaching Shakespeare in freshman year, doing a film project where students collaborate together on a script and think about rewriting and filming a scene, I end the year typically with that as we kind of finish up Shakespeare. But throughout the very beginning of the process, I have them thinking, hey, I'm looking at Shakespeare as an audience, but I'm also looking at it as a mentor text for later on when they create their own filmed drama. And I would say, just to define project-based learning, is a lot of people, they do the conventional teaching and then, hey, we're going to add this project on. Where project-based learning, from what I understand of it in my research, is putting the project out there at the beginning and saying, hey, we're going to approach it from the very beginning, looking at the skills we need to create this and learning through the creation of this project and collaborating on the project. So looking at it, the analogy is as the main course of the learning and not just a dessert item added at the end. But using technology is a great way to enter that. Google Sites, having a student create Google site would be an awesome way to do that. Having students, having them do a collaborative film project where they film a scene has been awesome. I've had students make an infographic when we were doing a digital kind of media literacy project. We were thinking about using some of those different tools. So what are your thoughts on project-based learning, and what are some of the best approaches to use? Or possibly, you mentioned Google Sites. What are some other possible types of projects that you could use to help students learn with that kind of approach?
Well, for me, when I think about project-based learning, my first, and this is something that I've been talking about for a while with people at my site, people within my district, with CCSS, Common Core State Standards. For a while, there were many teachers who just kind of said, well, it's ELA and it's math standards, but it's actually also got reading and writing standards for history and for science. And with project-based learning, one of the best ways to engage with project-based learning, I've often said, is it needs to be cross-content. Because with ELA specifically, at the junior high level, I am more ELA skills than I am literature content, for instance. Where at the high school level, there's definitely more literature. For a more skills-based setting like junior high, it would be great to have a project that is kind of anchored in content from history or from science, but the students, when it comes to a grade from the ELA teacher, we're grading on the skill of essay writing or the skill of crafting a good thesis. But it's, centered in that content they're learning from another teacher. I think one of the key things with project-based learning is you are trying to show the student as close to it as you can get, a relation for the learning that they're doing. And one of the best ways to do that is to center it in something that they relate to their life or something that they're interested in. It doesn't have to be history or science, but you really need to let it be something that the student can really latch onto. So with project-based learning, if you don't have the ability to make it cross-content, one of the greatest things I've seen with project-based learning, and I absolutely loved it, is the idea of the Genius Hour and letting students decide, with some kind of guidelines, what they want their project to be about topic-wise, how they want to actually deliver a product for their project, whether that is an essay, whether it's a video, whether it's a podcast, whether it is, a live dramatization of something. Letting the student decide that product be is one of the best ways to engage with project-based learning, in my opinion. Now, I know that that's not always an option, depending on the way your classroom is set up, depending on the way that you need to, grade or just ensure equity of access for certain things. But if you can let the students guide that learning with the project, that's kind of, pie in the sky dream. Past that, with kind of with tools, because I could go on forever. I think Google Sites is a great one. I also think screencasting tools like Screencastify, Loom is another one, and Loom is great because it's completely free for educators now, all their premium features. But screencasting to students, have different ways of recording videos. If, for instance, you don't want to be using a cell phone, letting students explore things like Zoom, Google Meet, Skype, to reach out and, bolster some journalism skills, reaching out, trying to interview people in different fields, letting them engage with the real world. Any tools where you can give them real world application as part of that project. You're not just going to, you're not going to give them a fish, you're going to teach them how to fish. And it's going to be awesome.
Absolutely.
I feel like I went on for a little bit there, but
oh yeah, no,
hopefully that
absolutely.
answered it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, just to echo some of what you said. The purpose of project-based learning, first and foremost, is to really put them into an active role in the learning process. So rather than you're steering another analogy with the fish one, teach them how to fish, not just take them fishing. But then also, if we're going with the DMV instructor, right? DMV instructor sits next to you while you drive and gives you feedback. You're putting the student in the steering wheel and you're giving them feedback and you're helping them kind of see some of the different directions that they could go. But it's not unlike the more traditional model of, hey, sit in class, I'm going to throw up the PowerPoint. You're in the back seat, I'm driving the car, I know where we're going. Is whenever you can build in choice, even if it's controlled choice out of these 5 things, to choose one, or out of this mode of expression, choose a topic to explore in that mode of expression. So really actively searching out opportunities for student choice. And then the other point you mentioned that was so important to project-based learning is, especially with the Genius Hour approach, is making it something authentic as well, as far as you want it to be something real and seek out an authentic audience. And with the internet the way it is now, that's more and more possible, where students can publicize their work to an audience far bigger than just the 4 classroom walls they're sitting in, which is a cool thing with Google Sites, or teaching them to use YouTube if they're vlogging. My class, actually, this class here, and I'm glad that I've gone on this journey with my students of creating a podcast video or series where you explore a couple different topics and try to publicize those out into the world. So that's awesome. But one thing that I know I'll have you kind of respond to, I know many people would say, but I'm not an expert in everything, right? So for the teacher that says, yes, but, right, that's all great, but what if I don't know enough about whatever thing they're exploring? Or what if I'm just not going to provide enough instruction? What would be the best thing to tell that teacher? Control the choice a little bit more to things that you can provide instruction to, or to just be a little more comfortable with the mess of learning in different directions?
That's a good one. And as an academic coach, an instructional coach, this is, I've encountered situations like this before. For me, if I wasn't concerned about the potential, reaction of the teacher, at least initially, my first words would be, honestly, if you are afraid of that, if that worries you, I'm not sure why you are then, because the whole premise of learning, at least from what the teachers that I've learned from, the professors that I've got to sit in front of and work with, the whole premise of learning is that it is messy and that it is ongoing. And the best thing I think we can do for our students, especially and I hear it echoed all the time in graduation speeches and in goodbye messages from teachers at the end of the year. I hear it echoed all the time, this idea of being a lifelong learner. We can preach that all day long to our students, but if our students bring us something that, and within limitations for the school environment, if it's not, academically inappropriate, it's not profane, or, explicit in some, in some dramatic way. Why not take the time to foster the relationship with the student and truly give them an example of what lifelong learning looks like by doing that, additional investigation with them, by letting them, heaven forbid, teach you something, even if it's just enough, teaching you something about culture that you didn't know, but enough to reassure you that, okay, I'm confident to let the student pursue this, and then let them continually just check back in with you. And even if I assigned the topics, as a teacher, I'm going to have weekly conferencing with students anyway. So if for some reason the student brings back work the next week that I feel, you don't really have enough to pursue this topic in this way, or I feel like it's inappropriate for what we're doing. I'm sorry. I appreciate your interest in it. I'm going to need you to choose something else. You have that opportunity to do that. But I think extending that, that opportunity to build a relationship will do wonders, and it will maximize the buy-in of your students tenfold if they know you're willing to learn something with them. So that's the way I would go. I do know that, of course, you're going to have other situations where there are teachers that are just not prepared for that. And if, they're really not prepared for that, the best thing we can do is, if you're in a supporting role like myself, being willing to go in and, co-plan, co-teach with teachers, being able to go in and assist them with, projects like that would be excellent. And if you're not, giving them suggestions on how they can kind of sculpt those recommendations that are offering for topics. But yeah, I think we just need to be brave enough to let our kids teach us things sometimes.
Absolutely. I was hoping you'd say something exactly like that. I think I've been there myself. I think that two things that have held me back a bit from jumping in. I remember thinking sometimes to myself, I don't know if my students can do it, can productively struggle with this type of project if we're doing infographics, or hey, we're going to jump into some kind of film project. Remember thinking, man, I don't know. And every time I've been ashamed at the end of the learning process for thinking that, because they've risen to the occasion and created amazing things. And I think it comes back to, you want to seek out choice and authenticity. Student choice and voice is going to give them a sense of agency, and that helps. I remember reading a book by Ron Richard where he writes about avoiding aboutitis. You don't want students to passively feel like I'm just learning about stuff. They're also taking on these roles of, I'm not just learning about writing, I'm a writer. I'm not just learning from a podcast or about a podcast. I'm learning to become a podcaster, or I'm learning to be a filmmaker, or right, where the identity is such an important part. And with lifelong learning, I think that's a part of it too. I'm not just learning in school, I'm a learner, right? And that's an identity thing. I think really encouraging that.
Yeah, I can 100% agree. And you're touching on something that is really near and dear to my heart, especially the last few years. A lot of people, know her work, but I am a big fanboy of anything that is Dr. Brené Brown, and I've read all her books and watched her, different talks, and done book studies with other staff members. And learning in any facet for any purpose, the very act of it is a willingness to be vulnerable and admit something you don't know, and be willing to incorporate the things you're learning. And I feel like I've heard time after time, teachers wish their students had a joy of reading, or they found joy or excitement in the learning. If you are not willing to let yourself be vulnerable and encourage your students to be vulnerable in that process, they're never going to find joy. They're not going to experience creativity or innovation. And Brené Brown says that, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And with those, that's the end we're going to feel any excitement or joy or happiness with education. So teach your kids how to be vulnerable by being vulnerable first.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just echo exactly what you said. You got to be prepared to be vulnerable as a learner, as a writer, as a reader, as a creator, and enter. We talk about at the beginning of my class, James Nottingham's idea about a learning pit is enter that pit of productive struggle, right? The challenge is part of the joy of learning, right? And then figuring out what works and what doesn't work. I think a final comment on kind of helping someone moving that direction is do control the choice somewhat. Too much choice. It's okay to give them several directions to go, but you don't have to give them unlimited directions to go. So sometimes giving them a nudge in 3 to 5 different ways they could go with it. And then just, you mentioned it a second ago, is coming alongside of them and showing them you learning the process. When we did the infographic project with our digital media thing, I was creating an infographic in front of them and wrestling with the process. When we do the film project, now, I mean, I haven't done it in the past, but now I'm going to kind of show them past students' films and show them some of the tools I would use if I'm making a film project. Just with this podcast, right? Talking with my students listening to this podcast right now is moving forward into whether if they're making a podcast, I'm suggesting, hey, here's the tools that I used. I'm going to talk to them about, here's some tips. So really coming alongside them, being vulnerable, and controlling the choice to nudge them in certain directions possibly, but do give them choice and authentic choice at that. Absolutely. So moving forward a little bit into the idea of blended learning, I saw an article recently that mentioned in the post-coronavirus world, in trying to find spacing, the possibility that they might create schedules where at some points, some students are coming to class on some days and other students are not, and learning at home through a distance learning model, or actually it's blended learning model. And then at other times they switch and other students might be at class to kind of adapt to a correct social spacing and social distancing, which is really blended learning. And I think moving forward, many educators, I would hope, are going to look at this as, hey, how can I bring all of these tools I've learned and played with during this time of challenge into my teaching in the classroom, which is really blended learning. Blended learning and flipped instruction is, how can I bring in this technology and do have some of the independent learning that students are doing, or independent practice they're doing, and having some of the direct instruction or the focused kind of mini lessons that teachers are providing outside of the classroom. So in the classroom, you can do things like conferencing, do things like collaborative learning, and really maximize that time. Could you kind of talk about how blended learning might work in an English language arts classroom in some ways?
Absolutely. So some of the, and by the way, first off, thank you for the resources you sent me, preparing for today. Some of the videos that you had sent me with Catlin Tucker, for instance, yep. In those videos, she was, talking about blended learning with StudySync, and a few years ago, my district adopted that as our ELA curriculum. So, I was doing a lot of that for a few years before I shifted to my current position. In an ELA classroom, I think, we blended learning. A lot of teachers see that phrase, especially veteran teachers, they can see that phrase and immediately, it's a little daunting. They may not know everything that goes into it. All they know is, well, it's going to involve, the computer, and it sounds like a lot more work, and I'm going to have to prepare a lot of stuff, and the kids might not do it. And I think the best place to kind of start with that is to get people comfortable with the idea of, whether they're doing small group or whole group rotations, starting with that, just in general, classroom settings, as they, would normally teach, getting them to step away from that strictly, well, I'm going to get up here and provide my lecture, and then the students are going to do the work. Students that space and time to engage with the learning at their own pace. So whether that is, okay, we're going to watch this video, I'm going to give you, starting very regimented, I'm going to give you time to watch it, give you some time to talk with your group, I'll go around and answer questions, and then we'll talk as a group. So still very structured. As you do that more often, you can start to branch out and, okay, maybe we're going to have one day where we follow that, in-depth structure, and then I'm going to have 2 days where the students are just working on assignments and I'm able to float around the room facilitating, working with my, intervention level students, my students that really need my help to, fill those gaps in their learning, and being able to let my students who are engaging with activity in that time to engage and, have that productive struggle with those higher level learnings. The eventual place that hopefully this gets us to, which will definitely be very daunting for many, is that final idea with blended learning of the flipped classroom. And that's the one I think most teachers think of when they hear blended learning. They're thinking of a flipped classroom. And I won't deny that a flipped classroom up front is more work for the teacher in terms of, recording videos and putting together presentations and supplementary resources and having those things organized and posted on your LMS. I think a flipped classroom version of blended learning is one of the best ways to actually get the classroom be student-centered, and then to get the teacher to truly do, the art of teaching, which is not standing up and being the sage on the stage all day long. It's facilitating, it's answering questions, it's helping students discover what they didn't know, not telling them what they didn't know. And we only do that by just, checking out devices, making the effort to learn these tools. I think if teachers can do that part of it, the blended learning or flipped instruction becomes a lot easier. And in this distance learning environment, teachers, whether they realize it or not, while they may be doing a very scaled back version of a flipped classroom right now, because a lot of us were very unprepared for this, it's still students are doing the learning at home, and then they're coming back to the teacher with their questions. That is all a flipped classroom or blended learning is. It's just we would normally have the time to sit with the kids in the classroom. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the blended, so define a couple terms as we go along here. Yeah, blended learning means you're using technology to provide that direct instruction piece, right? Whether it's an explainer video and then, hey, we're going to practice the writing in the classroom, or you're going to watch some of this video and we're going to have a class discussion when we come back. And that's what the flipped idea is, right? Some of the direct instruction outside of the class time to allow for more collaborative and independent learning opportunities with guided instruction alongside of that, which when I talked about instructional design with one of our teachers on special assignment, one of our instructional coaches at the district, that was a big idea that we talked about. Was the best version of learning is very active. I mentioned my students, they did a study where they looked at whether students preferred passive or active learning, and then looked at what was most effective. And even though students sometimes preferred passive learning because they're accustomed to it and it's sometimes less work and less challenge, active learning provides much better learning because you're getting your hands dirty, you're practicing, especially if that active learning has a feedback loop where the teacher's alongside of them providing them constructive feedback. So I think blended learning is useful in any way you can use it, because it helps students realize that the class time together is valuable, collaborative, and coaching time where they can practice with the teacher as a coach, or collaborate with people that they are working with together, right? So it really values that collaborative and active learning culture in the classroom.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, and and I think too, an important thing that I just thought about as you were saying that, and when we've mentioned it a few times, the two big keys with blended learning, when you think about just the students and the work itself, you really you have to think about equity, and then you also have to think about ownership. When as an adult, when you learn how to cook something, or you learn how to fix something on your car, if somebody just tells you and shows you, and you don't get the opportunity to really discover that for yourself, really learned it, and then the next time you have to do it, if you have to do it on your own, you're panicking, you're not confident. If students can engage with the material on their own and really own what they explored, what they read, and then come clarify that learning with you, again, it's that whole situation of teaching them to fish. They're going to have ownership of that learning. They're going to be confident moving forward the next time they're asked to do something similar. And they're really going to understand and be able to apply that idea, like you mentioned, that class time is valuable, and it shows them exactly why.
Yeah, a colleague of mine once told me, and I don't know if someone else told her, but she used the phrase, really, as especially English language arts educators, our goal is not to tell kids kind of what to think, but to teach them how to think. And I think that's an important distinction, that as I improved as a teacher, I went away from, I don't need to tell them what themes are important in of my semen. I need to show them how to think about literature and how to discover theme on their own, which is a big shift from the what to the how. And I think active learning, the guide on the side helps students learn how, the sage on the stage tells them what. And I think that's a big difference. And the pedagogy is not the technology, right? The reason you would blend a classroom is to allow those tools to facilitate the pedagogy even more in sitting side by side with the students and teaching them. However, kind of moving on towards the end of our discussion, you are a Google certified educator, so you are somewhat of an expert with certain tools. Could you, moving from kind of these theoretical things we've been talking about to concrete, what are some of the tools that you feel, moving back into the classroom, obviously distance learning is its own challenge, what are some of the tools that you feel could really help teachers create some of these teaching opportunities and different things?
Well, I oddly enough, it is a great question. I've been doing a lot of work lately with some folks in my district, kind of thinking about, okay, what are some of these Google tools for distance learning, but also looking at it with a lens of, once this period of distance learning is over, how is this learning still going to be valuable when we, go back to our classrooms? And, while I can't speak to Microsoft products or Apple products, with Google, I think the kind of first place to start is really, thinking about communicating and connecting. One way that you can, obviously do that is just using, connecting with your students regularly, just whether it's answering questions or even checking, hey, how are you doing? How are things going? Using Google Classroom is another great way to, communicate with them as well. You can, of course, do a lot more than just communicate with Google Classroom. That's where, you can give them resources, you can post things in there. That can be more of a learning management system for you. And then even further into connecting and communicating with them using Google Meet, for instance. A lot of people are using Google Meet or even Zoom to do those kind of video call features. Google Chat is another great way to have that communication, and you can set up groups on there. So you can have a class where only those class members are in that group, and you can chat about work or just have some time to catch up with your students. The next area that you really need to consider is going into more of a management kind of lens. And with that management, that's where you really kind of get centered in Google Classroom and Google Drive. Google Classroom, more of that place where you can post assignments and resources and announcements, set up meetings and calendar different things. Google Drive being that place where you actually create the assignments, whether that's Google slide presentations, Google Docs for word processing. But I really encourage teachers to move past slides and docs, really, engage with tools like, Google Maps, Google Drawing. Let your students get a little more creative with what they're doing, whether that's infographics, posters, images, videos. And using casting tools like Loom or Screencastify is another great one. But just having the tools you're going to use to create those assignments and just a way to gather and organize it is going to be key for not just distance learning, but your classroom in general. And then lastly, I think the other big thing is that facilitating the engagement piece. And this one is really, there's not necessarily a specific tool that's the engagement. This is really more of the teacher understanding those tools enough to be able to use them to truly guide the instruction, to guide the learning with the students, whether that means you're commenting on work, really engaging with feedback through those assignments in different portals. But I think those are the easy place to start a lot of teachers, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with Google. And the big thing to know is that they're constantly improving all of these products and offering more ways and more creative opportunities for them to be used in. So yeah, those are a few.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate I've been using Loom. You gave Loom a shout out. Loom recently, and I forgot to mention this when you said it, premium version, free for educators permanently. So some features have been opened up temporarily during the crisis, but Loom has said we're going to open this up permanently. I've used Loom on several occasions, creating a little explainer video, and it's very easy to use. There's no time limits. I really enjoy using it. Flipgrid, I've found is a really great way to connect to students, and that is a really versatile tool as well. And so then, yeah, just to echo what you said, connect with the kids, having that connection. What you want to avoid with technology is just using it as an assigner. It's not just for assigning. You want to use it to connect to students, provide feedback, whether it's through a Flipgrid video, through Google document comments, where you can connect and support and provide feedback, and then allowing them to collaborate, whether it's collaborating on a shared slide or document, collaborating through Flipgrid, collaborating or accessing support materials on a shared Google site or a shared or a Google Classroom, right, that unifies it all. That's the other important thing is simplicity, right? They know they can go to one place to get what they need. You don't want to have you don't want to have more than one channel, so to speak. You want to have one channel, and when they go there, they can find the resources they need, and they can go there, they can find a place to connect and find support for what they're learning.
Oh, absolutely. And, and I think too, as you were talking, I had this thought that, back to that connecting aspect, one of the most important lessons that I learned, when I first started teaching, and I think it's important to share it with, those who are pursuing teaching, is that regardless of, your content, and regardless of, your personal experience, if it's similar to your students or not, the first job of any teacher is relationship. And technology more and more every day is begging for us to just use it to connect with each other. We are a species that is built and craves connection, and that is the main way we foster a relationship with someone. If you are not using the technology at your fingertips to first just connect with your kids, and I've told teachers before, in the last month or so, hey, if you don't have a lot of students that are reaching out to you or coming into your Google Meets or Zooms, that's fine. If your students don't have questions, they just want to talk to you, talk to your kids. Let them know that you're there. Doesn't matter if it's to answer a question about the work or just so they have someone to chat with. Just foster that connection with kids, and technology is right now especially our best way for us to be able to do that, and it will continue to support that effort when we're out of this period.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. Learning is a social at its core. It's collaborative at its core. It's learning from a coach and an apprenticeship model. It's collaborating with other learners. And man, I can echo that. My best learning, I think everyone can, their best learning experiences, right, is when they connected with a teacher who was passionate about their subject and cared about their students. And then we're able to collaborate, also moments where you collaborated with other classmates of yours. So my final question for you is, I have been created this podcast for my CSUB class to learn from other brilliant educators such as yourself and get some different perspectives. But they're going to they have an option in their final project to create their own podcast episode. I know on your Twitter, it says podcaster on there. So if Podcast Troy of today could visit emerging first podcaster Troy in the past and give him a couple tips, what would those be? Troy, you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm still there. I'm sorry. My audio got wonky. I think the first thing I would say is you don't have to have the best tools in the world. You can start as simple as just recording audio on your phone, on your computer, whatever you. And and this was a tool that I discovered when I first started podcasting, and I still use it because it is amazing, and this is how I build my podcasts, is I use an app called Anchor. And have you heard of it before?
Yes, I think I actually I was searching best podcast things for students to use. So I think I've already linked it in their project, and if I haven't, I'm going to go link that before. But yes, I've heard of Anchor. Is that a great one?
Oh, it is hands down, it's amazing. And I know that there are other apps out there. I've seen a couple of them before. And you don't even have to use an app like that if you don't want to. If you would prefer, to just put the audio together on your own, get it hosted somewhere and do that, that's always a route you can go. But what is so great about Anchor is that Anchor is everything for free, and they aim to be that way forever. So you don't have to pay anything. You're not paying to have some random site host your podcast. They actually have great editing tools in it where you can add in, sound effects and music. And then what's also great is if you have a Spotify account or an Apple Music account, you can actually get clips of popular music that you have in your library and use it as background music or transition music in your podcast completely for free. And then they will post your podcast anywhere. Anywhere and everywhere that has podcasts available, it will post it for you. It makes it so much easier, and actually it takes the stress out of podcasting to the point where it becomes fun. And a tool that helps you do something fun and learn something new. And then my only other piece of advice is have yourself a script, because you don't want to go off book when you have an idea you want to get out. You don't want to ramble. And if you are, especially like today, if you're interviewing someone, having an outline of what you want to talk about becomes infinitely helpful. So yeah, I would say those are my big tips.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to echo what you said, as you talk, I have another laptop open at my feet with the exact script I've been talking to you about. And I would echo that. And I sharing that script with who you're going to interview before you talk to them is really helpful, because it helps them kind of organize their thoughts and think about what they're going to do. So definitely share your script with your guest in advance. Have it kind of with you to guide you through the process so you don't ramble. I would say also, with the technological side, I know for this one, other times I've done video. More and more, I've found that sometimes the video drops out. So we've done it. This has been choppy, but still taking the video feed out might help it. And then having a direction, but then the fun thing with the conversation is you'll learn something in the conversation that allows it to go a slightly different direction, and you got to allow it to be organic too and go different ways along with that. And then, yeah, just having fun and enjoying the discussion is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I know it's been a little bit choppy here or there, but thank you so much for sharing some of your insight with us today, Troy. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
All right. I hope you broke your foot recently. I hope that feels better and makes a quick recovery, and all the best of luck to you as an educational coach with all the challenges and that go with that moving forward into this interesting time in education.
And you too. Good luck. You are doing some good work, helping to get these future peers of ours prepared and ready to go.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, Troy.
Thank you, Beau. You have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.